So the topic I gave my presentation this morning is God's silent cry. God's silent cry. For some reason my voice is giving trouble, so if you hear it chipping in and out, please understand. I was listening to a discussion between two pastors on YouTube this week. And what they were trying to do is to prove that God and Jesus have two different personalities. One of them said that if you look at what Jesus was in the New Testament and you compare it to what God was in the Old Testament, it is clear that it's two different people. He's saying if you look at Jesus' mode of operation and you compare it to the person you see in the Old Testament, it is clear that it could not be the same person. Right? So his contention is that Jesus is the one who governed in the New Testament, and the Father, who is according to him is a stricter, more serious person, is the one who was in charge of the Old Testament. Right? There's a brother in Kingston who we have frustrating ongoing debates with. He says that Jesus did not exist until the incarnation. Jesus had no pre-existence. So in the Old Testament, it was God the Father, this stern, rigid, strict person. And then in the New Testament now, the man Christ Jesus, which of course the Bible says that Jesus is the express image of the Father. So that theory already doesn't hold water. But anyway, I was thinking about it. And if you look at it, you realize that the person that we saw in the Old Testament does not seem to match the character that Jesus portrayed. In fact, Jesus came and said things that were directly opposed to some of the things that were said in the Old Testament. But we believe, I believe, and I know all of us believe, that the same person in the Old Testament is the same one who came on earth. It wasn't the Father. A lot of the things that, in fact, I believe that everything that was done in the Old Testament was Jesus. So how do we balance the discrepancy between that person and the Jesus that we knew? There's a verse in Hebrews chapter 13, verse 8. I'll read it. It says simply, Jesus Christ the same yesterday and today and forever. Can anybody explain to me simply what that verse is saying? What does that verse mean? Auntie Jill is saying he's the same person from the beginning until today. And I agree with that. Alright. So how then do we explain the fact that the person we see in the Old Testament seems to be a completely different individual than the one that we see in the New? Alright. We'll explore it a bit more. Jesus, we refer to Jesus now as the meek and lowly Jesus. The kind of person that he was a person who displayed humility, calmness, a non-violent person. Look at some of the things that Jesus did. He put children on his lap and he blessed them. He had time for prostitutes. Remember Mary Magdalene came to wash his feet. And the men around were rebuking her, and then they couldn't understand how Jesus could consort with such a person, knowing that she was a prostitute. And what did Jesus do? He rebuked them. Right? He was a person who had time for prostitutes. He allowed his disciples to get very close and personal to him. We know the verse of John leaning on his bosom. Right? Even my own father, I would feel a bit awkward to go down and put my head on his chest. Right? My own father. What kind of person was Jesus that he allowed a man who was not related to him in any way to come and rest his head on his chest. The only person I do that for is my wife or Zane. They became, right? That is the kind of person that Jesus was. He went down on his hands and knees and he washed his disciples' dirty feet with his own 2 hands. He didn't put on any gloves like some of you ladies will do. He washed their dirty feet. And he went down to the lowest, most despicable parts of society, and that is where he spent most of his time. Not in the synagogue, not in the rich people's house, in the lowest parts. He went to the people who we would turn against, the mad people on the street, with dirty sores on their bodies, demon possessed. Those are the people he consorted and mixed with. And you can see a person who was love personified, a person who was calm, gentle, approachable. There was a time when I thought of Jesus and I could pray to him and I could feel comfortable. And then when I thought of God the Father, I didn't feel that comfortable because I didn't understand that Jesus is the express image of the Father. So what it means is that God the Father, who is sitting on the throne of the universe, would wash my feet. Just think about that. He would wash my cheesy foot. And he would allow me to lean my head on his chest. If he could manifest himself here now physically, and I go and lean on his bosom, he would allow it, and he would welcome it, and he would want it. Think about trying that with Andrew Holness. So that is the person that we see when we think about Jesus. But the same Jesus, the same person, when you go to the Old Testament and you see some of the things that Jesus did and said, it seems to be in direct contradiction. In the Old Testament, Jesus seemed to be cold and ruthless and vengeful. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. If you go to 1 Samuel chapter 15, I won't ask you to go there, I'll just read it. Verse 2 and 3. God gives an instruction to King Saul. Right, and I know we're all familiar with it. Look what God says to Saul. Jesus, the meek and lowly Jesus says to Saul, "Thus said the Lord of hosts, I remember that which Amalek did to Israel, how he laid wait for him in the way when he came up from Egypt." What Jesus is saying here, Anton, is that I am holding my, he seems to be saying, there is something that Amalek did. This was hundreds of years ago. When Israel were coming up out of Egypt, the Amalekites laid in wait for them and attacked them from behind. And hundreds of years later now, Jesus is saying, I remember that. He seems to be saying, I still hold it against them. Now go and smite Amalek and utterly destroy all that they have. He seems to be saying, here's your chance to take revenge for what they did. He says, spare them not, but slay man, woman, infant, suckling. So infant would be like Helene. Infant would be like Helena. Suckling, that's the babies that are still on the breast. That would be like Zane. So he's not pardoning anybody. He's saying not even the baby that is sucking you should spare. Right? In addition to that, kill ox, sheep, camel, ass. Now, that is complete and utter eradication. Not even a dog you should leave alive. And this is coming from the meek and lowly and loving Jesus. He instructed Saul to do that. And the reason he gives is that I remember what they did to you 100 years ago. So now I want you to go and take revenge. That is what it seems to be saying. So, this is one of the examples that the two men I was listening to drew upon. They said that God the Father is the side that shows vengeance and justice, and Jesus is the side that shows love and compassion. So they were saying the two of them have opposing characters and personality. Right? A God who could instruct you to kill even a baby that is sucking the breast. That can't be the same person who came in the New Testament and took those same children and put them on his lap. It does not seem to make sense. There seems to be something wrong. Look at what God says again. He does something here that I never understood. We all know the story of Uzzah. Right? Uzzah was one of the men who were carrying the ark when David was trying to bring it to Jerusalem. The ark was God's symbol of his presence, and it was forbidden for anybody to touch it. Right? Look what 2 Samuel 6, verse 6 and 7 says. It says that when they came to Nashon's threshing floor, Uzzah put forth his hand to the ark of God and took hold of it. So Uzzah touched the ark, something which was forbidden, right? But when I read why Uzzah touched the ark, I asked myself the question, couldn't God have shown him some mercy? Why did God react the way he did? Look at what it says. It says, for the oxen shook it. So what was happening is that the ark was being carried on a cart, and apparently they reached a rough road, and it started to shake. And Uzzah was trying to help. He didn't want the ark to fall, so he put out his hand to try to steady. And what did God do? It says the anger of the Lord was kindled against Uzzah, and God smote him there for his error. And when I read that, I thought, man, this looks away. Why did God smite him for his error? It was that he was, it didn't say he was deliberately being mischievous. It says, an error, he made a mistake. He was trying to help. And there he died by the ark of God. The same Jesus who we see in the New Testament with John leaning on his bosom is the same person who struck Uzzah for trying to steady the ark. It does not seem to make sense. We see the same thing happening again in the days of Elijah. Elijah was sitting on a hill. And the king of Israel sent his captain with 50 men to call Elijah. The captain came and he said, man of God, the king says you should come. You know what Elijah said? Elijah said, if I'm a man of God, may fire come down from heaven and destroy. Not only you, the one who is speaking, but all the 50 who are with you. Right? What did the 50 men have to do with anything? They just came because they were commanded, they were soldiers. They came to carry out the instruction of the king. And Elijah called down fire from heaven and burned up not only the one who was faced with him, but the one who came with the captain. All of them, all 51 of them were consumed by fire. The same Jesus set the fire. Another set came. 51 again. He said the same thing. Man of God, the king says, come down. And he was a little even more feisty. He said, come down quickly. So he added to the iniquity. And again Elijah said the same thing. If I'm a man of God, let fire come down and consume. And the fire came down again and consumed him and all the 50 that were with him. It is interesting to me that when Jesus was on earth, he visited a city, and the Bible says they did not receive him. And you know what the disciples said? They said, do you want us to call down fire on this city like Elijah did? Who had set the fire to destroy Elijah? The same Jesus. You know what Jesus said to them? You know not what spirit you are of. He rebuked them harshly. He was the one who set the fire down when Elijah called for it, and now the disciples are asking, let us do the same thing. And Jesus, who is the same one who had set the fire, rebuked them harshly. It seems to be a remarkable contradiction. Are two different people. Same thing with Elisha. Elijah was walking merrily along the road one day. And what happened? Some children, I think 40 of them, came and started following behind him. And you remember what they were saying? Don't call him. They were mocking him. So we know that Elisha was born. They started mocking him. Oh, this is how children are. Children do what they see adults do. Right? For the children to react like that, it must have been fed from something they saw the adults do or say. What did Elisha do? Did he turn and bless them? The Bible says, bless those who persecute you. Jesus said that. Did he turn and bless the ones who were persecuting him? Did he do what Jesus himself would have? What do you think Jesus would have done if it was him that those children were doing that to? What do you think Jesus would have done? Jesus Christ on earth. I can guarantee you he would not have done what Elisha did. Elisha turned and cursed them. And what happened? 2 bears came out of the woods. And I don't know if they killed them, but I know they mauled them. Right? And it was the same Jesus who put children on his laps who sent that bear to maul those children. God, Jesus in the Old Testament seemed to onlookers who don't understand to be 2 completely different persons. And that is one of the things that atheists will say to you, right? I mean, Daddy was telling me about this man who he's an atheist. And one of his reasons given for not believing in God, he says that the God of the Jews, I think Richard Hawkins is his name? Dawkins. He says the God of the Jews is a murderer. He commits infanticide, that is killing children. He's revengeful because, as you can see here, God instructed the children of Israel to take revenge hundreds of years later for something that the Amalekites did. Those Amalekites who attacked the Israelites from behind were dead long time. Right? And yet God commanded the Israelites to wipe out the children, the great-great-grandchildren, for the sins that their fathers committed. Of course, if you look deeper, you will know that the Amalekites carried on their sins for generations coming down. Right? And God had to wipe them out because of legitimate reasons. But not to an onlooker who doesn't understand. It wouldn't seem that way. He says that God takes revenge. God commits infanticide. God commits murder. God orders that witches, women be killed. And he ordered that he instructed that people to be killed for breaking the Sabbath. If you went outside on the Sabbath and picked up sticks, you were supposed to be killed for that. So, that is one of the reasons he gave for being an atheist. He said the God of the Old Testament is too vicious and brutal. I don't want to know such a person. He's a serial killer. That's the phrase he used. How do we strike the balance between these 2 approaches that we see from the same person? Bear in mind that it's the same person we're talking about. Because I am not one who believes, and you don't believe, that it was God the Father in the Old Testament and Jesus the Son in the New Testament. It was the same Jesus who was operating in the Old Testament. Right? One time the Jews came to Jesus. And Jesus said to them, before Abraham was, what? I am. What was he saying? I am the one who was there in the days of Abraham, and I was there before Abraham. So it was the same Jesus. How do we balance the 2 discrepancies, the seeming discrepancy? I was thinking about it when the men were debating. And the best analogy I can think of is to use myself. When I was my first year of teaching, I think I shared this with another lecture. My first year of teaching was very challenging because my personality is not. Sorry, as a teacher, she stepped up. My personality is not. It's not aggressive. It's not strict. I'm an easygoing person. When I was younger, I used to smile a lot more than I do now. And so when I went into the classroom the first year, with 40 children in front of me, all of them from different backgrounds, all of them with different behavior. Some of them from disciplined homes, but the majority of them have nothing in discipline, nothing in behavior. And I went into the classroom thinking, oh, just be yourself. So I smiled a lot. I allowed them to get close. So sometimes I would go to school and I would find my drawers all open. They go in there and take out what they want. They come and take up whatever they want off my desk. They got very familiar. And you know what the old saying goes? Familiarity does what?
Breeds contempt.
Familiarity breeds contempt. So my first year of teaching was very challenging because I tried to be myself and to show them the real me. Right? Yes, that was before I left. I was just 20 years old. I didn't know anything. So it was a hard lesson to learn, but a valuable one, because that I think I lost control of that class completely. Right? Everything I told them, they took it for a book. Because they believe that, oh, teacher is so nice, he doesn't mean what he says. So the second year I came back, I put on a completely different face. Completely, right? Even when I had something to smile or I refused to smile, I showed them a face that was always strict, always foreboding. I got a piece of tape and I put it around my desk, 3 feet around the desk. And the first rule I made was that no student must pass that line. When they came to mark their books, they had to stretch to pass it, not to pass that line. Nothing on my desk must be touched. No student must go in my drawer. I kept them at a distance, right? And sometimes there are times I could have said things to them softly. I deliberately said it harshly and in an overbearing voice, because I realized you have to keep a little fear in their hearts at all times. Otherwise, they will hate your love or weakness. So I started out like that, and the other teachers came to the class and they saw it barred around my desk. And some of them found it funny, but the children had a different reaction to me that year, because they realized that I was going to allow them to run amok anymore. It was the same set of students they gave me that year, right? The following year.
You followed them?
Yes, I followed them from grade 5 to grade 6. It was hard for them to accept and understand why teacher behaving like this. He was so nice last year. And now all of a sudden he's so mean and grumpy all the time. And you know what? Inside of me, I was dying to be myself, to show them my natural self. But in the back of my mind, I knew that if I ease up off the gas for 1 minute, they are going to fall right back into the same dirty habit. Right? Some of them used to come and take my bag. Before I asked them, they take the bag and carry it and put it in the car when I'm going home. I said, don't touch my bag. And I knew they were just trying to help, but because I wanted to keep them at that distance for them to understand. I am the teacher and you are the student. We're not the same. I had to treat even those students who were so helpful in that way. And it was hard for them to adapt and to adjust. Right? I heard some of them, they were saying, he used to be nice, he's not nice anymore. I don't like him, I want to go to another class. And they start, I heard them. It cut me to hear one of them say, I used to like him, but I don't anymore. I wonder if I should be soft with that one. But no, you can't show favoritism. And I had to show them a face that was myself. But why did I have to show them that face? Why? Can anybody suggest a reason? Why did I have to show them a face that was not me? Alright, I'm hearing mumbling. I'm not getting a direct answer. Yes, Ashley?
Because they took the first one for granted.
Alright, they took the first one for granted. You are correct. I want something more specific than that though. Yes, Jordan? Order. To get order, yes. Still not quite what I'm looking for. To teach them a lesson, yes. Boundaries. No. To teach them. Alright, you are all correct in what you are saying, but the answer I'm looking for is.
It was for their own good.
Alright, Sister Howard, also correct. The answer I'm looking for is I had to behave that way because of who I was dealing with. Because of who I was dealing with, right? Do I need to come in here this morning and say, all of you who are sitting there, put your finger on your lips. Don't talk while I'm up here talking. Do I need to do that?
No.
Well, I hope not. Right? But why do I not need to behave that way in here? Why?
Because we understand.
Because I'm dealing with a different set of people. I'm dealing with adults who understand things and adults who can be independent and think for themselves. When you're dealing with children who have no discipline and no understanding, you have to deal with them in a different way than you do with adults, right? It was the same thing with God in the Old Testament. It was the same thing. One time Jesus was asked, should people be allowed to divorce? Does anybody remember what Jesus said? And the Jerusalem. He said, Moses, because of what? The hardness of your hearts permitted you to put away your wives. What Jesus was saying to them is that the condition of men's hearts in those days, it was hard. God had to deal with them in a different way. God had to operate with different principles. He had to show a side of himself that was not him. A face that was not his true face. Right? And because of their stiff-neckedness, God had to be hard with them. He had to tell them to do things that was not really what he wanted them to do. You know, that year that I took that approach, after a few months and I realized that I had them where I wanted them, you know what? I could ease up a bit. And there are particular students who I could give a little leeway because those students knew their place. I knew they wouldn't pass it. So I had select ones I could say, go in my drawer and take so and so. Please put my bag in the car. Because I know that those students would not take advantage. They would know their place. So I could give them special privileges without being biased. Whereas there are others of them, I would never dare say to them, do X, Y, Z. They would take it past their place and take advantage of it. Again, it was the same thing in the Old Testament. There are certain people who came to understand more about God, and God could deal with them in a different way. Right? Like Moses. God spoke to Moses how? Face to face, like a man speaks to his friend. Right? He called Abraham his friend forever. He dealt with David and Daniel and these people differently because they had a greater understanding of who he really was. But in general, the rest of the class, coming to your sister Heather, the rest of the class were indisciplined, they were stubborn, they were in darkness, and God had to operate them on the level where they were. Right? Sister Heather?
So was it that with the passage of time, was it that people became more enlightened why he chose to show a different, or just this time table and say, I have to show myself this way now?
Well, I don't think he showed himself. He didn't show himself fully until Jesus came. Jesus was the full, people saw the snippets of his character along the way. And I'm going to come to that, right? Because that's what I'm looking at. People saw the snippets of God's character throughout the Old Testament. And there were certain people who understood him far more than their peers. If you look at some of the things that David said in Psalms about him, and some of the things Solomon said, you realize that they had a greater understanding of who he was.
Right.
But until Jesus came,
So that's what I'm asking.
Right.
It was that.
in the fullness of time, when the true revelation came now, people could really see what the same person, what they had been dealing with all along. Because as I said to you, it was the same person. Until he came to earth and they saw his true face now. Until
But what is the difference now that he could show his true?
I think it was just the fullness of time. God had a set time for when the Messiah was to come. He had a set time. I don't know the exact answer, right? I know that one time God was about to do something. I don't remember the exact circumstances. And he said he's not going to do it yet because the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. Anybody remember that verse? He was waiting on the Amorites to buck their iniquity or to get all the chances they should get before he did what he had planned to do. He has a time set for everything. There's a time set for when the Messiah should come. There was a time set for Pentecost, a time set for when he will come again. So exactly what he was waiting on, I can't say. But one thing I know is that it was the same person. And just like how I could show particular students, give them leniency, give them a little more of who I truly was. Because those students, you know what? When the others were gone home, there were particular ones I could call to the table and talk to them, and then I could relax and be myself. And they said, teacher, why is it strict? I said, I have to be strict because the other members of your class will get out of hand if I am not. And I could reason with those. And I would say, when I'm in class, I have to be strict with you too. But other than that, otherwise, when we're alone together, so you don't need to worry about me. There were students I could deal with like that. And it was the same thing with God in the Old Testament. He dealt with some people seemingly in a biased way. But there was a reason for it. The point I want to make and to highlight this morning is that even though Jesus showed, he was forced to show this hard side of himself. He was forced to tell his people to kill and to be merciless sometimes and to be ruthless at other times. Under the old covenant, as Sister Sanya said, even though this situation existed, if you read the Old Testament carefully, you will see that there are dozens and dozens and dozens of places where God was silently crying out to say, this is not what I really am. Dozens of places, right? It's like, I wanted to show my students how nice I am, how pleasant I am, how fun I can be. I wanted to be myself with them. But only a few of them could understand it and accept it. Only a few of them wouldn't abuse it. It was the same thing with God. And I want to look at just a couple of verses where God was silently crying to his people and saying, listen, this is not what I am. This is not what I am. This is how I want to be towards you. Even in the Old Testament. So as I said, I want to highlight a couple of verses that Jesus said of himself in the Old Testament, even when he seemed to be so hard. One of my favorites is found in Psalm 103. We all know the verses. Verse 13 and 14. It says, like as a father pitieth his children. What? So the Lord pitieth them that fear him. When God uses an illustration to bring out something, he thinks of the image that he's creating on your mind. And that analogy is something I can empathize with immediately, right? Because I just have a son now. I used to empathize with my students. I used to empathize with my smaller cousins and siblings. But when you have your own son, Jordan and Anton will understand one day. When you have your own son, it is a completely different scenario. My son, I look at him, this innocent little human being who depends on me for everything. Right? If I take him and put him outside now to stand in the rain, he can't do anything to help himself. He depends on me for everything. And to be honest, I can't think of anything I would do for him. I can't think of anything I would not do for him. And when God uses this analogy, you know what he wants me to think about? He wants me to use my own experience to relate to what he's saying. He's saying in the same way that you think about your child, this is how I think about you. And we hear this verse so often that it becomes commonplace. But if you think about what God is really saying, when I go to him and I pray and I ask him for something, it's the same way like when Zane comes to me and asks me and says, Daddy, water. God is saying, I have the same attitude towards you. It seems ridiculous. It seems unbelievable. Right? And you know what is even more unbelievable? It was Jesus saying this in the Old Testament. He was silently crying out to the people and saying, you see me as this hard, cold, merciless person. This is how I really feel about you. He was trying to break through to them and tell them, this is how I really am. Right? David is the one who wrote this. David understood. But unfortunately, nobody else in Israel knew this. He was crying out to them. Verse 14 says, for he knoweth our frame. He remembers that we are dust. Right? Sometimes he does some things. Last night I was drinking my juice and he came in the couch sitting and he came and just boxed it over. Right? And he has done that numerous times. Before I could move or stop him. And when I was about to get annoyed, I remembered. You know what I remembered? He's 1.5. He's a boy. How can I be upset with him? I remember his phrase. I remember he's just a baby. God is saying it's the same way I think about you. When you mess up and you do things that are disappointing and you fail and everybody looks at you bad, you know what? I remember what you are. I remember who you are and I know your circumstances. So I pity you the same way you pity your children. When everybody look at them and say they are rude and they don't like having them around. I know why they behave like that. It's my son. So I pity him more than you. God is saying it's the same attitude that I have towards you. Unbelievable. So when you think of God like that and you go to him to ask him anything, you know what you think? This is how he feels about me. You go with a different attitude. And it was in the Old Testament when he was misjudged that God was silently trying to tell these people, this is how I feel about you. He says something similar in Isaiah 49. I won't stay long because I know it's hot. In Isaiah 49, look at what he says again. It says, can a woman forget her sucking child, that she should not have compassion on the son of her womb? I have to make reference to my son again, right? You can all tell that this is a new experience for me. My son is attached to me. He's close to me. And there are certain things he comes to me for. But I must admit, begrudgingly, that there are certain times that only his mother can console him. Only his mother, right? When he just wakes up, it doesn't make sense I touch him. When he's hungry, it doesn't make sense I touch him. And if he falls down or hurts himself, he passes me and goes to his mother. There's a bond between a mother and a child that even the father doesn't have. And that's natural, right? She brought him out and she nourishes him from her own body. Look at the analogy God chooses to use again, right? The most endearing, the most affectionate, the most tender relationship, he takes it again. And you can see that it's the same Jesus, because Jesus used so many analogies in the New Testament. And here he's doing it in the Old Testament. He likens his relationship to us with a mother and her child. But you know, it's not only her child. What does he say? Her sucking child. The mother might. I remember when Cade was about a year or two, we didn't let him out of our sight. Now sometimes he's over Sister Howard 2-3 hours and we don't know where he is. Because, you know, we believe that he's big enough now to know what to do and what not to do. When you have a sucking child, I've seen her asleep, in the middle of her sleep, and the baby just says, and she jumps up, ready to attend to whatever need he has in the middle of the night, 4 o'clock in the morning. Because when a child is sucking, you might forget Jerry for a few minutes or Kate, but you're not going to forget the one that is on the breast. That one cannot be forgotten. That's the analogy God chooses to use.
Yeah.
And he's saying, can a mother forget her child that is on the breast that needs her every minute of the day? Look at what he says. I mean, thinking about these words are mind-boggling sometimes. Look at what he says. Yeah, they may forget. So what God is saying is, it is more likely for Joseph to forget about Zane. Yet will I not forget thee.
Amen.
Amazing. It is more likely for a mother to forget a little baby that depends on her for sustenance every minute. It is more likely that you will forget that baby, God is saying, than for me to forget about you. Right? It's like, does God really mean these words that he's saying? And this was in the Old Testament when everybody misunderstood him. Look what he follows it up by saying. He says, behold, I have graven thee upon the palms of my hand. What does it mean to grave something? To write it, to emblazon it, to put it there. When I was about 10 years old, I had my first crush on a girl in the community. And to my great delight and pleasure, she gave me a little picture. In those days we never had cell phones, so it was those little pictures. She took it at school. And I was lucky enough to get one. And you know, I got the picture in this hand. I walked around. I was riding my bicycle. I rode the bicycle with one hand. I was brushing my teeth. The picture was in this hand. I kept it there. I went outside and it was drizzling. I put it in the pocket. It was in the hand. And when I was bathing, I put it up where I could see it. Right? It was graven on the palms of my hand. If you ask me where that picture is today, I can't tell you. But at that time, it was the most precious thing to me in life. In the palm of my hand. So that at any point of the day I choose, I could look at it. And I could remember. Right? This is the analogy God uses. He says, I have graved you upon the palms of my hand. He's giving the impression that, listen, I have you here. Anytime I'm watching you with affection and tenderness in the palm of my hand. When you think of the analogies that he uses sometimes, and you think, this is the kind of person that we're dealing with. And this was in the Old Testament. Right? He was silently trying to tell them, look at how I feel about you, Look at my concept of you, That's what he was trying to tell them. And these analogies that he uses show me that it was the same Jesus that we were dealing with. It was the same person. Right? Because Jesus said something similar in the New Testament. In Matthew chapter 23, verse 37, he says, O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou that killest the prophets and stonest them which are sent unto thee, how often would I have gathered thy children together, even as a hen gathereth her chickens under her wings, and ye would not. And you know what he was doing when he was saying these words? He was weeping. He was crying, because the same heart of love that was speaking these words, it was the same person that said these words in the Old Testament. He says, I'm in the palm of my hands, I have your picture. I'm looking at you every minute of the day. And he says, your walls are continually before me. It was the same Jesus. So, I have about another half hour of notes here to go through, but I'm not going to exhaust and weary the saints. I think you understand what I'm saying. What I'm saying to you is that the person that we see in the New Testament, if you check the Old Testament carefully, you will realize that he was, even back then, trying to tell them who he was and to show them his true nature. He had to deal with them in a certain way, just like I did as a teacher, because of the persons he was dealing with, the hardness of their hearts. He had to show them a side of himself that wasn't really him. But when you're dealing with children, you have to show them a face. I remember there are times my daddy beat me when I was growing up, right? And the person that I know him to be now that I'm grown and I understand the person that I know him to be, I can't even believe that he beat me. Right? I wonder where he got that sternness from. Right? Because when I see him with his grandchildren, I'm like, okay, so I should have been a grandchild. And he spends hours outside with Cade making toys, and he'll leave his office work whenever Zane comes, he drops everything and he comes, right? Now I understand, you understand a person's heart. It is the understanding of who he was trying to say from in the Old Testament. And as I said, a few people got snippets of it, but Jesus was the ultimate revelation of God. And you know how I want to tie this together? The verse I started with says, Jesus Christ the same, yesterday, today, and forever. There are times I might go to my wife and ask her for something, or she might come to me. And my answer will depend on the mood I'm in that day. Or her answer might depend on the mood she's in at that time. All of us, we are humans, right? That's how we are. Our mood changes. You hear somebody say something about you and your feeling towards that person change. Somebody never tell you hello correctly and your feeling towards that person change. We humans, we are fleeting like the wind. We change with every wind. Everything moves us and changes us. And so because of that, when we come to each other, it's easy to develop mistrust and bad feeling and suspicion. Because that is how we are as humans. But when you're dealing with a person who does not change, who cannot change, you know what? You can go to such a person with confidence, with assurance, and be sure of the way that person will react. When a person tells me, I view you the same way you view your son, I have no reservations anymore about dealing with that person. And he said it from back in the Old Testament. before even Jesus came and gave the full revelation of himself. So I'm going to stop here. But I'm assuring you that you can trust him. And you can always trust what he will do. Even when you see these things in the Old Testament that seem so hard and cold, you understand what his heart is really like, you can always trust him. You can always trust him. Yes, Sister Lord.
So it's okay for me to talk to God. This week I was there and I was just talking to him and I said, Lord, I am coming to heaven. He said, nothing will stop me from being with you. I said, I will be there, and I said, nothing will stop me. I was just talking to you guys. So it's okay to talk to you guys?
I'm sorry you didn't hear that his presentation this morning. So I don't know exactly what he's talking about. But absolutely, that's what he wants. That's what he wants, right? And you know, this does not have anything to do with what I was saying. But man, when I think about it, when you look at the things God says about us, like this verse, he says, I have graved you on the palm of my hand. And I think, man, this is the way this person is. And I ask myself the question, how can I really leave this? Where am I going to go? Can I leave this and go to what?
Go to what?
Go to what? Right? I see my friends pursuing doctorate. Some of them pursuing big house. Some of them what can I go to that is more wonderful than this? They'll go where I'm going. I'm not going anywhere. So when you tell him that you're coming to heaven, trust me, I'm telling him the same thing with you. Nothing will stop me.
Amen.
Sister Heather.
I also say us know then that based on the fact you were saying, the type of people you was being with and then it just behooves us to be. That is our work's going to do it, but the more we seek, set ourselves then to know him and to, have a relationship, then we can get to understand who he is and have that kind of relationship that he can be himself.
Absolutely, absolutely. The more my students became what I wanted them to be, the more I could relax and be more myself. Because I realized, okay, I'm getting them to where I want them, so I don't have to be so hard and rigid. It was a similar thing with God. The more we understand him, then the more himself he can trust. If you have a wrong understanding of God, you can't come to know that person. And if you don't know that person, he can't reveal himself to you. That is why the Trinity doctrine and doctrines of hell and things like that are so dangerous, because the Bible says God must be worshipped in spirit and what? In truth. If you don't know the person you are worshipping, you can't worship in the right way. You can't have that relationship with him if you think he's a person who can roast you in hellfire forever and ever. So, the study of what he's really like is the most fascinating thing to me in the entire Bible. In my entire Christian walk, it is what he is like that fascinates me the most. Anyway, I'm going to stop here. Thank you for your patience and your cooperation, your participation. I appreciate it.